game that we had, and it's even worse that I have to sit here and look at you in a Packers jersey.
You know why I wore it, right? I'm not a Packers fan, but
the fact that you have a Packers jersey tells me that you're a Packers fan.
In just a little bit.
Yeah.
So here's the plan. We're going to count down 10 guys who were 40% owned or less. I don't think Jameson Crowder fits the mold. There's a couple other guys who've fallen in there. We're going to talk about them at the end of the 10. We might have some time for Q&A as well. So Tags, let's just get right into it at the start with AJ Brown, who looked really good. Now, you're not especially excited about Marcus Mariota being able to support 2 wide receivers. You don't think AJ Brown could be the number 1 over Corey Davis?
No, I don't. We've heard Mike Vrabel talk about this throughout the offseason, saying that Corey Davis is their number 1 receiver and that it's not all that close. And they had AJ Brown, actually, he was kind of behind in training camp. He was dealing with some hamstring issues going, all the way as their off-season workouts that they had with the team. So he was kind of behind in that aspect, kind of like Corey Davis was as a rookie. But he was in competition with Tajay Sharp and with Taywan Taylor for that number 2 or number 3 wide receiver job. The further I've gone into this, I do see that A.J. Brown was number 2 on the Titans in snaps played among the wide receivers above Adam Humphries, which is actually promising, because that's something that when I start going through and writing the primer, I can see how much these guys are on the field. And game, the first game of the season, depth charts can say one thing, but we need to pay attention to the snaps that are on the field. I think AJ Brown is going to have some usable weeks in fantasy football. Unfortunately, it's going to be kind of like Corey Davis in the fact that you just can't rely on him on a weekly basis.
For what it's worth, a lot of people are asking, should I drop Corey Davis at this point? Guys, this is what we expected. Obviously not a 0-point performance, but we expected him to be not startable last week against Denzel Ward, and that's just what we got. Corey Davis is the number 1 in this offense. They're going to have to pass more than they did last year because they're going to be playing from behind more often than last year. Don't drop Corey Davis. I do think Corey Davis is the number 1 over Brown. You can pick up Brown if you want, but it's kind of like a wide receiver handcuff, in my opinion. If anything happens to Corey Davis, maybe A.J. Brown could be a weekly wide receiver 3, but that's probably the extent.
Yep.
A running back, the first running back we're going to talk about here is Ronald Jones. Now, both of us like him quite a bit. I just went on Chris Harris' podcast this morning, and his number 1 waiver wire pickup is Ronald Jones because it's Bruce Arians' offense. And yeah, Ronald Jones was bad last year in Dirk Cutter's offense, the same way that Devonta Freeman was awful under Dirk Cutter. And then he became really good once Dirk Cutter left. So I think this is a good situation for Ronald Jones. But Tags, is he going to get the lion's share of the workload, or is it just going to be, continue this committee all season?
I don't think he's going to jump into the workhorse role right away. I mean, he clearly looked like the best running back in week 1. And I think this is something that Bruce Arians, he actually did want someone to earn this job. He wanted someone to walk through and kind of earn that starting role. I don't think anybody did that in the preseason. I don't think anybody did it throughout training camp. And I think that's why we saw a timeshare of, like 26 snaps, 28 snaps, 22 snaps. So they're trying to figure that out. But if you actually watch the game, Ronald Jones was by far the best running back on the field for them. Right. Ogunbowale is going to participate for sure on passing downs. He seems like he's pretty good in that role. They trust him as a pass protector. Payton Barber is the odd man out. We need Payton Barber, his snaps to start moving down. And Ronald Jones is one of those guys where you don't necessarily want to grab him and expect him to produce for your fantasy team right now. But if you're looking for someone that is not going to start and you're just looking for an upside stash, I think Ronald Jones might be the best running back available right now.
So what's his upside, Tags? Could he be a high-end running back too if they give him all the carries?
He could be in the RB2 range. I do think that they're still going to have Ogunbowale mixed in on passing downs, which could take away some of that upside. Knowing the offensive line is brutal there. It's not a good offensive line in Tampa Bay. And then you kind of factor in Jameis Winston's struggles, and you don't want to really rely on him for RB2 production every single week. But if he does earn, let's say that he moves into that 35-40 snap mark, we could put him in as an RB3 nearly every week. And understand there's going to be a few ups and downs, but for the most part, he's going to give you RB2, RB3 performances.
You know who I think he is Lamar Miller last year with the Houston Texans. Doesn't have big upside. Yeah, if he plays the whole season, he'll end up as an RB2. He's going to have some big weeks, and usually he's going to be useful. So I think Ronald Jones is well worth picking up. And we've talked about this before, Tags, on our podcast, but there's a lot of guys on this list that people are really excited about, probably going to spend 20, 30 fab bucks on. I think this is a light waiver wire week. No one I would spend more than $5 or $6 on.
Yeah. And this is something, again, we did talk about on the podcast. And I was saying that you might be better served this week, not spending all your fab money and spending up for someone that maybe just had one big week. I don't think we have a home run, like a guy that's a can't miss in the waiver wire this week. So therefore, maybe you sit back and you wait for someone to drop someone like Corey Davis. Maybe someone drops someone like Geronimo Allison. Guys, the ones you're picking up off the waiver wire, it's very, it's uncommon for them to be every week contributors. So while Geronimo Allison had a crappy week one, while Anthony Miller had a crappy week one, it's 1 week. I mean, we're not dropping Aaron Rodgers because of 1 week. Understand that Allison had a bet, like the Bears is a tough matchup. Aaron Rodgers didn't look very good. Anthony Miller was dealing with some injuries. So don't overreact based on 1 week. This is where you're going to be able to sit back on the waiver wire and kind of see who everybody drops, and you might get better players than they're picking up.
Yep, absolutely. Tags, one guy that was dropped in under, over 50% of leagues is Golden Tate. He's out there. Justice Hill's out there in 70% of leagues right now. Anthony Miller in 55%, Geronimo Allison in 55%. Would you take Golden Tate, Justice Hill, Anthony Miller, Geronimo Allison if they dropped ahead of some of the guys on this list?
Yeah, Golden Tate, I mean, you're now down to 3 games that they're going to be without him. So it's like even a lesser suspension than you had when you were drafting, which I felt like him falling to the 12th, 13th round, you were going to put him on your bench anyways. When he does come into the starting lineup, he's going to be a usable option. That team is going to be throwing the ball. I mean, Eli Manning threw for over 300 yards yesterday. Those yards have to go somewhere, and it's not like Cody Latimer or Benny Fowler are going to stay in the lineup and steal those targets. So I do think that he's someone that should be owned. Justice Hill is more of like, he's a handcuff. He's not going to give you weekly performances that you can rely on. So he's more of a guy that you're waiting for an injury. And unfortunately, it might even be 2 because it seems like they still want Gus Edwards somewhat involved.
As for 17 carries because he sucks and they don't really care if, he runs out there in the second half.
I know, but they had a lot of starters out there. They had Lamar Jackson out there until the 4th quarter, and then they went with RG3. So I still think Edwards is someone that Harbaugh likes an awful lot. He's just a guy that's going to run downhill. He's going to get what's blocked. But as far as Anthony Miller and Geronimo Allison, those guys should absolutely be owned. I would take both of those guys. Well, Jameson Crowder and Geronimo Allison, that would be a tough one for me, where it's like I could see if you need production now, Crowder's the guy. But
Miller for upside, big time. I mean, he's got a lot more upside than Jameson Crowder. Jameson Crowder caps out as a flex play.
Yeah. And yeah, that's exactly how you should feel about this matchup. And like knowing they were up against Buffalo, that was a matchup where everything kind of funnels to the middle of the field anyway. So it was a good matchup for Crowder. They don't have a tight end and Chris Herndon on the field. So when he comes back from his suspension, you're going to see those targets come down for Crowder. It's not a great offense, one that we want to target every single week. So I would rather take the upside on my bench of someone like Anthony Miller, who, again, wait until he plays a full game and let's see how he handles it.
I've seen a lot of people say, well, Jameson Crowder had 17 targets last week. You don't get 17 targets unless you're the clear number 1. And then I pulled out a random sample. Week 5 from 2018. Dante Moncrief had 15 targets. Eric Ebron had 15 targets. John Brown, 14. Emmanuel Sanders, 14. Michael Crabtree, 12. Pierre Garçon, 12. Chester Rogers, 11. Keelan Cole, 10. Guys, matchups dictate these kind of things. And we knew that Jameson Crowder had the best matchup by far against Buffalo. We knew Robbie Anderson was going to have his hands full against Tre'Davious White. It was really obvious. You sit Robbie Anderson, you start Jameson Crowder. I even used him in cash games. That's how confident I was. And I just think it's not going to get any better for Jameson Crowder. We already saw his best week. If you want to use him as a wide receiver 5 that you can plug into your flex every once in a while, that's fine. But don't spend crazy fab money on Jameson Crowder.
That's kind of where I'm at. But yeah, I mean, again, if you're sitting there with someone that has some wide receivers suspended, you're in a weird spot where you have injuries at the wide receiver position, whatever the case may be. Maybe that's when you pick up Crowder as someone that can fill a couple weeks for you. But I don't think he's someone that you need to go out and spend more than maybe 10 fab bucks on. And that's probably not going to get it done considering he had 17 targets.
Right. Okay, Tags. You and I both like Giovanni Bernard. It's not so much that we expect him to be great. It's just he's going to have an opportunity probably for a couple weeks with Joe Mixon banged up. How long do you expect this to last, and what is his upside while Mixon's out?
The more we're hearing about Mixon, the more it seems like it's not like a major injury, and it could be a 1 week thing. And in fact, Joe Mixon might not miss any time at all. They might push him back on the field this week. But even if he does come back this week, Giovanni Bernard is going to offer some viability in fantasy matchups. The biggest reason that I think Giovanni Bernard should move up your boards after this week is because we saw a very competent Bengals offense, and that was without AJ Green, missing starting offensive linemen, so many different things. Granted, Zach Taylor did have the there was no tape on his offense. Nobody knew exactly what he was going to do. So now that there's tape on him, it's going to be a little bit easier to adjust. But knowing they're throwing the ball that much, Giovanni Bernard is an option in the passing game, and it could be like an Adrian Peterson, Chris Thompson type situation where Joe Mixon is the he'll be an RB2 in fantasy, maybe an RB1 some weeks, but that Giovanni Bernard should be involved. I mean, that defense is not going to be great every single week, so you're going to see them throwing the ball much more as the season goes on. So I do think Giovanni Bernard, he's not only a guy that you can grab in case Mixon does miss time, and then Bernard could be plugged in as an RB2, but I think that he's going to have some value in weeks where Mixon's even on the field.
Yeah, you could use him in desperate situations. Like if you're picking up a running back to stream during a bye week or in place of an injury, one of your best bets is always going to be Giovanni Bernard. So you could pick him up now. There's a little bit of upside while Mixon's out. And then you use him, when Mixon comes back, if you absolutely need somebody. He's my favorite waiver wire pick of the week. But again, I'm not very excited about it. $5-6 fab bucks at tops. That probably won't get him, but I certainly wouldn't mind having him. And now Chris Thompson, he's a guy that I've liked, for a while. It's obvious Washington's going to be playing from behind a lot. When they do, they're going to have to pass. They don't have any wide receivers. I mean, we're talking about Terry McLaurin as maybe their wide receiver 1 or Paul Richardson. Jordan Reed's hurt. Chris Thompson had 10 targets. That's going to happen occasionally, and he's going to break some of those for a big run. So what do you think about picking up Chris Thompson right now and using him in your flex?
Chris Thompson is similar to like that Giovanni Bernard. Like Chris Thompson doesn't have the upside that Bernard does in terms of like if Mixon were to mix time, but Chris Thompson is one of those guys where if you went the zero running back strategy, or you drafted Melvin Gordon, or you drafted Lamar Miller, or someone like that that's going to miss some time, grabbing Chris Thompson makes a whole lot of sense, as somebody that you could plug into your flex spot, your RB3 slot, and just kind of get a decent floor every single week. He did see 10 targets. This was a game that they had positive game script throughout the entire game. Obviously, they lost it in the end, but it kind of goes to show that they don't have the offensive line right now to run. Without Trent Williams at left tackle, it's going to be difficult for them to pass block long enough to get the ball down the field. So, yeah, I think Chris Thompson is going to be heavily involved all year, and especially now that we know Darius Geis is going to miss time with another knee injury, which means Adrian Peterson is coming back into the starting lineup, which means he's not a pass catcher. We've seen this with Adrian Peterson throughout his entire career. He's not going to start becoming one now. So Chris Thompson is going to be involved. He's going to be a flex type play nearly every single week, especially when we look at the fact that Washington is not expected to win a whole lot of games. So we should be looking at negative game scripts, which should benefit Thompson.
So if Adrian Peterson's out there, and he's not in a lot of leagues, he's owned in 55% of leagues, would you rather have Adrian Peterson or Chris Thompson?
If it's a PPR league, I would rather have Chris Thompson. I think he's going to be a more reliable performer that you could rely on. Whereas if it's like a standard league, those are more touchdown dependent. I think Adrian Peterson's that guy. He's going to have games where he has 18 carries. And we saw that. But then there's going to be games like last year against the Eagles, as a matter of fact, where he had 4 carries. That's going to kill your fantasy lineup. You don't want that. So I would rather let someone else take, Adrian Peterson as a flyer, because if Trent Williams doesn't return, that offensive line is just not very good in pass protection or run, trying to run the ball. So I'm going to say that Chris Thompson is probably the running back who has the most value moving forward.
I think Adrian Peterson has more upside, obviously, because he had 1,000 rushing yards last season. But the issue is, like you mentioned, just game script. When are you ever going to feel comfortable playing Adrian Peterson? Because if the Washington's behind by a touchdown or more, they're not going to use Peterson. He won't be on the field. It'll be Thompson almost all the time. Now, granted, there's going to be some games where Adrian Peterson gets 15, 20 carries and goes for 120 yards. But how are you going to predict when that is? Most of the time, you're just going to play him and get burned.
It's difficult. And I just pulled this up just to look at it. They're playing Dallas this week. And obviously we saw Dallas come out, guns blazing last week. And knowing the Redskins could not get to Carson Wentz, it makes me feel pretty good about Dak Prescott this week. Last year against the Cowboys, with obviously Darius Geis on IR, Peterson in one game, he had 24 carries for 99 yards. In the other game, 12 carries for 35 yards. It's kind of a Jekyll and Hyde thing. Like, you're going to have so much difficulty projecting him every single week that relying him on as anything more than like an RB3 or a flex is going to be the wrong move.
All right, let's move on to the next group of players, where we're going to start with Marquis Brown. Now, this, from what I'm hearing from the general public, is going to be the top pickup of the week. I've got him number 7, and the reason why, Tegs, you talked about it on the podcast, he played 14 snaps. Jameson Crowder had as many receptions as Marquis Brown had snaps. Mm-hmm. Now, granted, when he was on the field, he looked really good. In fact, he had another touchdown called back. Marquis Brown could have had an all-time great week 1. Are we over? Am I overlooking him? Like, I've got him number 7 on my list. Is he just going to start playing more and prove us all wrong? Or is he just going to continue getting these type of snaps?
I don't think that's the case. It's really tough to say that you want to rely on a Baltimore receiver. Like going back to last year, that I mean, there's a reason that Marquise Brown was falling. Looking at the snap counts, Seth Roberts was on the field for 51 snaps. Willie Snead was out there for 49. Chris Moore 31. Miles Boykin 18. Marquise Brown 14. So it seems like he's only involved in certain packages on the field. Now, can that number grow? Absolutely. It should grow. He was dealing with Liz Frank injury. He obviously showed that he's capable of producing on the field. He did see the most targets. Like he was targeted every 2.5 routes he ran, which is just that's just ridiculous. Again, you're not going to play the Dolphins every single week. Like it was just ridiculously easy for Lamar Jackson. It was really easy for the Ravens. I want to see it again before going ahead and trusting him. We knew, for all the people that talk about Lamar Jackson as like, now he's a top fantasy quarterback. And I understand why we like Lamar Jackson to begin with. He was one of the best late round values in fantasy football. But understand the reason that he wasn't being drafted as a top 5 quarterback was because he did not have passing chops. So knowing that he lacks that, knowing he's not going to play the Dolphins every week, knowing that Marquise Brown ranks 5th on the team in wide receiver snaps, there's a whole lot of red flags here. So Marquise Brown is someone that if you're like in a bye week issue where you feel like the matchup is good, it calls for them to pass the ball or they could take advantage of some matchups over the middle of the field. Okay. But for right now, I do not want to rely on him as a starter. And I have him in a lot of best ball leagues because I felt like there was going to be weeks like this. I didn't think he would have weeks like this on 14 snaps.
Absolutely not. And Lamar Jackson, frankly, didn't look very good. He threw a lot of dangerous passes. Obviously, that Dolphins defense is going to make a lot of quarterbacks look good. But he wasn't under pressure at all, and he was throwing to wide open receivers. That's not going to happen very often. Now, when Brown gets the ball, sure, he can break a big run. But how's that any different from Travis Benjamin, who's also playing 20% of snaps?
Travis Benjamin, sleeper this week against the Lions. I don't want to get into that just yet because that's like primer stuff, but I think he's like a sleeper to perform this week against the Lions.
All right, we're going to get to the next wide receiver here in just a moment. But first, if you guys don't mind, if you're enjoying the show, please hit the like button. It tells our bosses that you're enjoying these shows and, makes it a priority for them. And also while you're at it, I've got my live stream coming up on Thursdays. I do one by myself where I'm talking start, sit. And then Tags has one on Sunday mornings where Tags, tell them what you talk about.
Yeah, so Sunday mornings, I kind of go through the biggest injuries of the week that you need to know about because a lot of people, like, let's just be honest, we watch a lot more football than everybody else does, and we pay attention to a lot of these things that you might not have time to. So Sunday morning, I sit down with you guys. I go through the injuries of the week that you need to know about, what it means for fantasy football, who benefits from those injuries, and then as well, I sit down and I take your questions. The injury portion is like the first 10 minutes, and then honestly, I do 50 full minutes of answering all your start sit questions, trade questions, whatever the case is. And this past week we had a massive crowd. So thank you guys who showed up to that. Hopefully we can get some of you guys who didn't make it this week.
So guys, if you don't want to miss out on those future videos, hit the subscribe button down there right below the video. You'll see it says subscribe 32K. Click on that and you'll get notifications to let you know when we're doing these live streams, when we have other videos coming out as well. Okay, Tags, let's keep moving where we've got Devonta Parker, wide receiver from the Miami Dolphins. And he didn't have a big day. He did have that one big catch, but man, he is talented.
In a game against probably the toughest cornerback unit out there, maybe not the toughest because I'd say Jacksonville might be those guys, but Baltimore, their cornerback unit is one of the best in football. And to know that Devonta Parker was able to have a reasonable fantasy output, like with 3 catches for 75 yards, it kind of just shows that, he can win those contested catch situations if Ryan Fitzpatrick is willing to target him. Fortunately, Josh Rosen was put into the game, and then they saw, well, he threw 3 passes, and one of them happened to be an interception. They're going to go right back to Ryan Fitzpatrick. This week against the Patriots, it's another tough matchup. It really is because Stephane Gilmore is going to be covering. Most likely, I would imagine he's going to be covering Devonta Parker, and Gilmore is one of the best cornerbacks in football. But again, this kind of goes back to the fact that the Dolphins can't stop anybody. They can't, they're not going to hold anybody to a low total, which means they're not going to be able to run the ball 20 times per game, which again, it means they're going to be throwing the ball 30 plus times every single game. And looking around, it's like, where are these targets going to? Albert Wilson's hurt. Kenny Stills was traded. Mike Gesicki has been very inefficient. Kalen Ballage, whatever. Kenyon Drake isn't on the field for whatever reason. So there's like a whole lot of reasons that Devonta Parker should be owned. Understand that this is probably not a great week that you want to play him, but he should definitely be owned.
All right, let's talk tight end. And if you're picking up a streaming tight end, it's definitely Darren Waller if he's available. He goes up against the Chiefs, who were the number one easiest opponent for tight ends in fantasy last year. So it's a great streaming pickup. But what do you think about the long-term appeal to Darren Waller after what he did last night?
Yeah, I mentioned to you this on the podcast before the game last night. So it was before the game. You guys can listen to that. I said that Darren Waller is someone that everybody should have picked up before the game. That once Antonio Brown was gone, I felt like Waller was locked into 80 targets. And if you're getting 80 targets as a tight end, you're going to finish as a top 12 guy 95% of the time. And Waller, to be honest with you, he might be more talented than Jared Cook. People wanted to talk about Jared Cook for so long that he was going to be a breakout tight end. I remember going back to the Tennessee days. People were waiting for Jared Cook, and he just never became the guy that people wanted him to. And he finally did in this Greg Olson, John Gruden offense. So we know that the tight end position was important. Waller is a highly athletic tight end. He's not going to be kept in the block very much. He's like essentially a big wide receiver. My wife and I, we were watching Hard Knocks, and she's like, he kind of looks like he's built like Mike Evans. So he's kind of like a big wide receiver. So Darren Waller was always going to be someone that I was going to pay attention to. And then once they cut Antonio Brown, it was like, okay, this guy is definitely a pickup, and I'm going to rank him as a top 12 tight end going forward.
So, Tags, I'm not especially used to watching some of these rookies play. And when I went back and watched the film on the Lions game, every single time TJ Hawkinson had the ball thrown his way, I'm like, who is that running back? He's huge. As TJ Hawkinson moves like a running back, man. He is so smooth. And, we were really into this narrative of, well, it's not a narrative, it's just historical precedent. Rookie tight ends don't perform well unless you're Rob Gronkowski or you're getting 10,000 targets because Odell Beckham's hurt, Brandon Marshall's hurt, Sterling Shepard's hurt, and Evan Ingram had to get all those targets. Is TJ Hawkinson just that good? I get it was 1 week, but he looked amazing, man.
I mean, he was the most complete tight end we've seen come out of the draft in a while. Like, he was a guy that was going to be on the field because he's able to block right away. And people liked him as a wide receiver. I was okay being wrong on him because, again, tight ends, they just take so long. Travis Kelce talked about this in an interview that I read a while back, saying that basically coming into the NFL, you think that you're all that, and then you realize there's a whole lot more to the game than there was just catching the football. He's like, becoming a great blocker, that's something that he prides himself in, and having to learn all those packages. So Hawkinson, to see him do this in week one is just remarkable. Like, now it was against an Arizona defense that was really short in the secondary. They were missing a lot of players. They're not very good to begin with. They didn't need to keep him in the block because the Cardinals pass rush isn't great. So there was a lot of things that contributed to his breakout game, but still, I am willing to admit that I am wrong on TJ Hawkinson.
Me too.
As someone that, but I will do this again though. I'm willing to be wrong on a rookie tight end because, again, I've done research that over the last 12 years, the only rookie tight ends that have ever finished as top 12 fantasy options, one was Evan Ingram. Again, Bobby mentioned those injuries that took place, and Rob Gronkowski. So it's betting against history is the wrong thing to do. But if you did take a chance on Hawkinson, congratulations, because he looked fantastic.
He does look really good. I still don't have him ranked in my top 12 tight ends for the rest of the season because, who are you putting him over? Vance McDonald? I'm not. I know it didn't work out in week one, but I can't move him into my top 12. Now, what if Darren Waller and Hawkinson are available in your league and you need a tight end? Who are you picking up, Jags?
I'll take Waller. Just because I believe that he has a safer role in the offense, whereas Kenny Golladay is going to have bigger days. Marvin Jones is going to have bigger days. Danny Amendola is clearly involved. And then they also have, Kerryon Johnson, who didn't do too much this week, but he's going to be a big part of their offense. So, I would take Waller over Hawkinson if you had that option, but Hawkinson should be owned too.
All right, we've got a couple more wide receivers to talk about, and then we'll touch on some other players too who didn't make the list. Preston Williams. I think he's more talented, Tags, than Devontae Parker. Now, he wasn't on the field as much, but like I mentioned on the podcast, when I watch Preston Williams, it flashes back to Miles Austin, the big wide receiver from Dallas, who was extremely athletic, came from a small school, got overlooked, and then he was really good. Now, granted, he plays in Miami, so it's going to be a little bit different. But Ryan Fitzpatrick's a gunslinger, and if they're going to throw the ball 550, 600 times like I think they're going to have to, I think that there's a role for Preston Williams to break out and maybe be the best rookie wide receiver this year.
I'm in a wait and see approach with him. And I don't think that's the case in terms of best. I think DK Metcalf showed week one what he's capable of, and Russell Wilson trusting him is really big for his production. But Preston Williams
going to throw the ball 400 times this year. We might see 600 from.
Oh, believe me, it's a problem. I mean, but DK getting 6 targets on a 20 attempt game from Wilson at 2 weeks after being removed from a knee scope is massive. Especially in a tough matchup. Those Bengals cornerbacks are actually really good, but Preston Williams, I dug into that like wide receiver core. So DeMonte Parker is the number one. Like that is he's the number one in that offense. There's no question about it. Albert Wilson's hurt again. Kenny Stills is gone, but we have Alan Hurns competing with Preston Williams for that number 2 wide receiver spot. Hurns actually played more snaps last week. Now, once Williams came on the field, he was targeted more, but it's something we want to pay attention to, because if you're not getting consistent snaps as a wide receiver, you're not going to be a consistent fantasy option. But if he does surpass Alan Hurns as the number 2 wide receiver, he's definitely someone that I'd be willing to pick up. I just don't think you need to do it right now.
Yeah, I would agree with that. He's on waiver wire speed dial for me. If he starts getting more targets, he's someone to look out for. And then Terry McLaurin, he's I guess you could say Paul Richardson's the number 1 in Washington, but I think McLaurin is very polished for a rookie receiver. What is it with these Ohio State wide receivers, by the way, that they just always go overlooked?
I mean, I don't know. McLaurin is one that I would have been willing to overlook, though, too, because I liked Paris Campbell, but McLaurin wasn't like a guy that was great in college that I felt like he was a can't miss prospect. But seeing him out there running 40 snaps, Trey Quinn was out there for 44 routes. Paul Richardson was 36 routes. So McLaurin's a starter in 3 wide receiver sets. That's always a good thing. The question is, do you believe that Case Keenum is going to look that good every single week? Absolutely not. That is not going to be the case, guys. We saw it in Denver last year. There were, Emmanuel Sanders was the only reliable one pretty much week in, week out, and he was the slot guy. That's why Trey Quinn to me is someone that I do like. He doesn't come with the upside that maybe a McLaurin or a Paul Richardson does, but I think he'll be the more stable option. Again, if they do not have a left tackle, because Trent Williams still hasn't returned to the team, there was rumors that he might come back this week. I don't know what would make him return to the team. He said that he's never going to play for them again. So I'm not expecting that. And if that's the case, then we're going to see Case Keenum under duress. And to be honest, the one way to attack the Eagles is their secondary. Like, you don't run the ball on them. So to see McLaurin have a big day was or a good day wasn't surprising, but to see him, go off for 125 yards, that was surprising. I didn't expect that. So, he's someone I'm more than willing to let someone else grab. If it was basically like, you don't have to spend any money to get these guys, McLaurin's not a bad stash, but I know that people are going to spend their fab dollars on someone like him, and I'm just not willing to do it.
So, Tags, one of our other favorite wide receivers who's not on the list here is John Ross. In fact, he's my number 1 wide receiver pickup here, just because the Bengals threw the ball 51 times. We had no idea what to expect with Zach Taylor, and Zach Taylor showed us, even in a neutral game script against the Seattle Seahawks, we're going to throw the ball 51 times. If there's 600 pass attempts on the table this year, up for grabs, even when AJ Green comes back, AJ Green, Tyler Boyd, is there enough room for John Ross?
I think there is. They threw the ball 51 times in a neutral game script on the road. Now, granted, Joe Mixon went down, after playing not even a half, and that obviously could contribute to them throwing the ball a little bit more. But again, the game script was kind of in their favor the whole time. It was kind of like a Washington thing where we saw them in the lead in Seattle, and it was like, okay. Now there was like some luck on their side. Tedric Thompson, the safety for the Seahawks, just early time to ball that kind of just, Ross is behind him waiting on this ball to come down that Dalton threw. And you could say that Dalton threw a good ball, but I still think it was just badly timed on Thompson's part, and it could have been an easily intercepted, and it would have erased one of John Ross's long touchdowns. But John Ross, to get 12 targets in the first game under a new system and do what he did with those targets, he's going to be in this offense. And, we talked about this in the podcast that if AJ Green comes back, it might be the best thing ever for John Ross, because you cannot leave AJ Green in single man coverage. If you do, he's going to eat you alive. This offense, if Zach Taylor, I don't want to say shades of Sean McVay, but doing a lot with a little is what he did in week 1. Again, it's only 1 week, but John Ross is someone that I'm willing to spend a pickup on, and I would be willing to spend 10 fab dollars on him. Again, he's probably going to go for more than that. You're probably going to see people spend 15, 20 on him, but I'm not willing to go that far just because there is going to be a little boom bust variety to his game, but seeing 12 targets in week 1 is obviously a good sign.
I agree with that. I like John Ross quite a bit. Again, it's been $5 or $6 fab bucks to pick him up. What about Malcolm Brown? He played really well. It looked like he got a lot of touches. It looked like he got a lot of snaps. But really, when you go back and look at it, he was just getting touches when he was on the field. But Todd Gurley played 65% of the snaps. Is Malcolm Brown actually worth picking out?
I think he is worth picking up as a guy that, they can have two running backs that are fantasy viable in LA. Like that offense is potent enough to do that. And the running back position has churned out fantasy points. You mentioned on the podcast, if you were to dial back Todd Gurley's production by 75% or 25%, whatever. And if that production goes to Malcolm Brown, he's going to be fantasy viable. It doesn't mean that you have to start him over, proven guys, but he's someone that you would love to have on your bench, because if something happens to Todd Gurley, clearly they like him more than Darrell Henderson in that lead back role. They do. Yeah. He looked fantastic. He scored 2 touchdowns. Some of those are going to go to Gurley. Some are going to go to Brown. But again, a lot of times we're going to look at the Rams and we're going to see one of the highest totals of the week. And we're going to be like, where are the points coming from? Malcolm Brown isn't a bad guy to throw in your flex if they're in a situation like that. And again, he has massive, RB1 upside if something were to happen to Todd Gurley.
I would agree with that. I think that you can play him in the flex most weeks, depending on the expected game script. They're not going to pass the ball to running backs much because they're using their tight ends quite a bit more. They made that clear in week 1. Now, granted, it's a small sample size, so I guess that could change. But Malcolm Brown is going to be useful. Just think about Tevin Coleman in Atlanta. Think about Mark Ingram in New Orleans. These guys were really good despite being the second running backs on their team for fantasy. And the reason why is because it's such a good running offense. The Los Angeles Rams scored 430 fantasy points from the backfield last year. If Malcolm Brown's getting 30% of that, he's going to be really useful.
Yes, that's where I stand on it. And knowing that Darrell Henderson in a close game got 1 touch, that's massive because Malcolm Brown is the guy that, and they trusted him in the red zone. That's when they went to him. So I don't know if it's like a Gurley thing where it's like he ran out of bounds. He's not in on the goal line. There's definitely some concerns with Gurley. And I don't want to sit here and say that he's worth nothing, but he's someone that I'm definitely worried about.
What do you think about Carlos Hyde? He looked pretty good last night. If you just took the name off the back of his jersey, you'd be like, hey, this guy's all right.
He looked good last night, right? And it's like going back to the beginning of Carlos Hyde's career. He was someone I liked more than most did. And I wanted to see him get in that workhorse role, without Frank Gore blocking his touches. And he did fine. He was always that workhorse guy, but he never looked fantastic where you're like, oh my God, this guy's going to be a monster. He looked really good last night. Duke Johnson looked good as well. And I think this is a product of what the Texans have in the pass game. With having DeAndre Hopkins, Will Fuller out there, and then mixing in Kiki QT or Kenny Stills, it is massive in terms of what a defense has to account for, the type of defensive fronts they're going to see. And I think that adding Laramie Tunsil to the offensive line, drafting a couple offensive linemen this year, it may not have helped in pass protection just yet because there's still a lot of kinks to work out there, but definitely in the run game, they had holes to run through. And then when they didn't have holes, they were breaking some tackles. So that was a 1-2 punch that was fun to watch last night. And it's the reason that I mentioned before Lamar Miller's injuries, I was saying that he had RB1 upside. I felt like he really did. But obviously he tore his ACL. They trade for both Duke Johnson and Carlos Hyde. So I am of the mindset that Carlos Hyde is going to lead that team in carries. Duke Johnson's going to be mixed in. It's going to be somewhat of a Mark Ingram, Alvin Kamara situation, not to the extent of the success that those guys will have. But I think that's the split that we're probably looking at with Duke Johnson being a bit more efficient, getting more targets, whereas Duke Johnson is the early down guy, or Carlos Hyde is the early down guy. He has RB3 value certain weeks. And again, that's another team. Their defense is not very good. So we're going to see them continually involved in shootouts, which is always good when it gets down to the goal line.
So tags among the 5 main running backs that we talked about: Gio Bernard, Malcolm Brown, Ronald Jones, Chris Thompson, Carlos Hyde. Which of these guys do you most want?
Oh, I'd probably say Carlos Hyde or Malcolm Brown, because I think that I think both of them are similar in terms of they're going to give you value even without an injury. But if there is an injury, they could walk into an even bigger role. Malcolm Brown is he's the guy that, RB1 upside, whereas Carlos Hyde might be stuck in the RB2 territory.
Ronald Jones is so close as well, just because we don't know what Bruce Arians is going to do. Bruce Arians has always had very good fantasy football running backs, and Ronald Jones looked great last night.
He did. Jones did look good on Sunday, despite Jameis Winston being terrible. But again, guys, it's 1 week. Don't so many people have told me that. Are you done talking about Jameis Winston now? No, I'm not, because there's going to be weeks where he kind of goes off, and you're going to be like,
still has Mike Evans and Chris Godwin and OJ Howard, guys.
Yeah, they're going to have better days. They're going to have a lot better days. So don't, again, guys, just like I'm telling you not to overvalue the performances of Marquis Brown, John Ross. It's the same thing about guys don't over panic about guys like Jameis Winston. Don't over panic about guys like Anthony Miller. let's get at least a 2-week sample before we start throwing any red flags on any player. Again,
Sure.
if these guys get 0 targets and finish with 0 yards in week 2, it's a problem. But 1 week,
of course they
I
drop them.
don't overvalue it.
Yeah, just remember, a lot of people panicked and dropped Marlon Mack last year. A lot of people panicked and dropped Calvin Ridley last year. Those guys they weren't quite league winners, but they were pretty close to it. So it might be Anthony Miller. I wouldn't drop him quite yet. Okay, Tags, one other wide receiver I wanted to ask you about. Now, this guy's owned in about 50% of leagues, but I've got so many questions about him that I'm guessing a lot of you guys are wondering too. Michael Gallup, he looked really good. In fact, John Ross looked really improved. Michael Gallup looked like the most improved wide receiver yesterday in the NFL. He looked exceptional. So what would you do? Would he be your favorite wide receiver if he was available out of John Ross, Jameson Crowder, Anthony Miller, even Geronimo Allison?
I'd probably have to say yes. That was a game that I actually went back and watched again today because I just wanted to see. It was a new offense under Kellen Moore, and I just wanted to see what they were doing. They were moving players all around the formation, and it was so good. I like the Giants tried shadowing Amari Cooper with Janoris Jenkins to start the game, and they ultimately abandoned that because they were moving Cooper around so much. It was just difficult for him to follow him. So they changed things up, and then literally hell broke loose in that secondary where it was just like there's so many options. Randall Cobb even came forward and had a decent game. But Michael Gallup is someone who we've continued to hear about growing into his role, and knowing that Amari Cooper demands the attention that he does, Gallup's going to see some good matchups. And Kellen Moore called a phenomenal game. Like, I honestly, if you're a Cowboys fan, get excited. Like, Kellen Moore, like, finally brings something to that team they've been missing for a long time. It was such a vanilla offense, but watching week 1, man, that was so fun to watch.
You know, the Eagles are so good that I thought they were going to run away with this division, but the Cowboys looked awesome. It is going to be a dogfight at the top there, man.
Yeah, definitely can't wait to see those two mix it up.
Okay, Tex, let's take some actually, you know what? Before we do that, why don't you guys write your questions in the chat if you've got them? We're going to have time to take maybe 10, 15 questions. But first, Tex, we need to talk about some streamers at quarterback, tight end, DST. So if you're picking up a quarterback, I'm assuming you want to go with Josh Allen against the Giants.
Josh Allen is definitely one. It just depends on who's available in your league, because it's like going through it. Like Ben Roethlisberger is going to be available in some leagues. I'd be willing to start him this week over Josh Allen. Roethlisberger returning back home against Seattle, a team that just allowed 400 plus yards, 2 touchdowns to Andy Dalton at home. Now going on the road, they're bringing back a cornerback to start for them. Jamar Taylor is someone they cut after the preseason, and they're bringing him back because they were so disappointed in their cornerback unit last week. But Roethlisberger is someone who's available in some leagues. Josh Allen.
It's either like you got to go Josh Allen. Some people drop Jimmy Garoppolo. He gets Cincinnati. Kirk Cousins gets Green Bay. He's not owned in a lot of leagues. Mitch Trubisky against Denver. And then Derek Carr against Kansas City. But I wouldn't do that. Would you?
I don't think that I want to go there just yet. I know Derek Carr looked really good in 1 week, and he's done that. Like, Derek Carr's been that guy throughout his career. There's times where he flashes what looks to be like a franchise quarterback with a strong arm. He looked phenomenal last night. There's been times where I've seen him look phenomenal. It's putting a string of games together. Like, can you grow on that? And I just don't feel like there's ever been any consistency to his performances. I could say the same thing about Mitch Trubisky, who I am really down on right now, but there was glimpses last year of what could have been a great quarterback. It's just a matter of putting
those fantasy quarterback.
Yeah, well, I mean, he was a great quarterback at some points of last year.
Okay, sure.
But Derek Carr, again, he's another guy. Great quarterback at some points, but then there's other points where you're looking like, what are you doing? So it's just seeing it consistently. So I'm not willing to trust him just yet. At least we know that Josh Allen, his legs do work, and the Giants are they're abysmal right now. That defense has little talent on it, very little talent.
Josh Allen is a QB3. And he's probably a top 60 passer in the NFL, but he is the RB1 for his team. So you can definitely play him against the Giants, even if it's going to be ugly. Now, Tags, tight ends. Let's say TJ Hawkinson and Darren Waller are gone. You going Jimmy Graham against Minnesota, Trey Burton against Denver, Jordan Reed coming back, going up against Dallas. Do you like any of these guys?
These are tough to talk about just right now, just because I'm so early in the process for this week of looking into like streamers. And you've already crossed off the big ones that I would be looking to play. Yeah. Greg Olson is someone who's available in a lot of leagues just because nobody wanted to draft him. He played a ton of snaps. There's no competition between him and Ian Thomas, and they're going to play Tampa Bay this week. Tampa Bay is a team that was just rocked hard against tight ends last year. So, I mean, Cam Newton getting back on track after the rough outing last week. I think Greg Olson is a part of that. So Greg Olson would be, I think I'm going to line him up as a top 10 play this week.
All right, Tags, let's go DST. Yeah, Greg Olson's close for me. I think I've got him tight end 13 when I just produce my first set of rankings. Okay, so DST streamers, do you want to pick on Jameis Winston and go with Carolina?
I don't know if I want to do that. Again, I think that offense
but a
has
lot of people are going that way.
firepower. But I will say that it's a short week and they are traveling to Carolina, so it's possible that that's definitely a downside for Tampa. It's always tough to travel on a short week for NFL teams. So Carolina is a team that I would think about. I also think the Chiefs might not be a bad option, but even though Denver didn't
got rocked by Gardner Minshew, man.
I know it wasn't great, and they're not a great defense, but at the same time, I can't see the Raiders offensive line holding up again. Like, I know, again, there's a lot of people that are going to come at me with hate about the Raiders, and they have a diehard nation. I get it. But at the same time, really, could you have said, like, before last week's game, could you have told me that, oh, I'm confident in this offensive line, they're definitely going to be able to stop Von Miller and Bradley Chubb? I think they had a really good week. It seems like Vic Fangio, I don't know, man. It could be one of those coordinator head coaching things, because that was not a good showing by him in that defense. But it's not a great week to be streaming defenses. I suppose that you could look down to the Colts at Tennessee, but I usually try and start defenses that are at home.
Yeah, I like Green Bay at home against Minnesota. I get it. Dalvin Cook's really good. Adam Thielen, Stephon Diggs. But Green Bay looked awesome last week against the Chicago Bears, who have a pretty good offense. They were top 12 in the NFL in scoring last year. If you're in a more shallow league, some great pickups. Houston against Jacksonville and Gardner Minshew. Buffalo at the Giants and Eli Manning. I think those ones are solid. Now, Tags, let's get to some waiver wire questions. Actually, before we do, if you guys are tuning in now and you didn't hear earlier, it really does help us out if you hit the like button at the bottom. If you're enjoying the show, if you're not enjoying the show, obviously don't do it. But if you are enjoying the show, please do us a quick favor. Hit that like button. It tells our bosses that you're enjoying it and doing a good job. All right, let's see here, Tags. Can you read off a question from the chat? My chat's like frozen for right now. Wow, there's a ton all of a sudden.
Yeah, let's see. We have John Ross or Anthony Miller to own the rest of the year. That's a close one for me. I think Ross, if you need production now, if you're looking for future potential, I think Anthony Miller has the higher ceiling of them, because John Ross is going to be behind AJ Green as a target, and Tyler Boyd is still going to get his targets. I think it'll be a little bit boom or bust with Ross, whereas I think Miller can become a consistent option.
Somebody's asking if you should drop Melvin Gordon. Someone else is asking what you should do with Melvin Gordon. Don't drop him, but would you trade him, Tags?
Yeah, I mean, if I could trade him for anything right now, I probably would. It sucks. It really sucks because
Miles Sanders.
I'd take Miles Sanders for him like in a heartbeat.
Holy cow! Wow.
Yeah, if you're in a league with me and like you offer me Miles Sanders for Melvin Gordon, I'm taking it. Like, I'm running with that actually. I don't think Melvin Gordon's coming back till week 10. I don't think he has any ground to stand on after we just watched what Austin Eckler and Justin Jackson did. And they said they're not negotiating the season.
Like, seriously, they offered him $10 million a year. What in the world is this guy thinking?
But it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because the Chargers said they're not talking contract extension. They said once the year starts, it's either he's playing under the final year of his contract or he's playing for another team. And I just don't see another team trading for him.
Somebody said don't play Mahomes last week. Are you kidding me? Tags, you did not say that. Come on.
He's my number 3 quarterback. I wasn't excited to play him, but I said you're never going to sit Patrick Mahomes. I never said that.
All right. Let's see here. Drop Jameis Winston for Lamar Jackson. Yeah, I'd prefer Jackson rest of the season. I don't think he's going to pass well, but he's safe week to week with his running, and he's got some upside.
Yeah, I mean, after seeing Jameis not grow at all and have legitimately, we've seen this throughout his career. The hope was that he grew, and he did towards the end of last year. And the hope was that Bruce Arians can bring out the best in him, limit the mistakes, and he went right back to same old Jameis. So yeah, I did drop him down my board, and I obviously moved Lamar Jackson up. So yeah, I'd take Lamar Jackson.
This is an interesting one. We didn't talk about Danny Amendola, who had a really good day, saw a lot of targets. Aaron wants to know if you'd rather have John Ross or Danny Amendola.
I'll take John Ross. Danny Amendola, he's going to be a fine guy for bye weeks, but he's not someone that you're like excited about playing. Again, they're not playing Arizona every week. Arizona was down to 3 healthy cornerbacks in that matchup, and they were destroyed against the slot last year, even with those guys healthy. So Amendola was always going to have a big role, but I think you're going to see that slow down quite a bit this week against the Chargers.
Ben says that Tyrell Williams and Deshaun Jackson are both available in his league. Who should he pick up between those two?
Oh, wow. I'm going to say Deshaun Jackson. I just have more faith in his quarterback to be consistent. The dude just like created crazy separation. And Carson Wentz, by the way, notices these things right away. Like he has his eyes on the safety, and if safety takes one step in the wrong direction, Deshaun Jackson's gone.
All right, let's see here. Should I drop Justice Hill for Chris Thompson?
I would. I think that's fair. Yeah, I would do that.
What do you think about Raheem Mostert?
He's just a handcuff right now. I mean, like, I honestly don't want any part of that 49ers run game if I can help it, because it seems like Kyle Shanahan doesn't know what he wants to do. Like, even going back to last year when it was just Breida and Alfred Morris, people would start Breida, and then all of a sudden it's like, why is Alfred Morris getting double-digit carries? And it's like every single week, it's like we can't predict what he's going to do. There's going to be some games where it's upside in there, and you're going to be like, oh, I knew I missed out on that guy. And then the next week, he's going to have like 2 carries. So Mostert is like, I don't want to say a handcuff to Breida, because I think that he's going to get, I think he's going to mix in. But as of the time being, I can't trust him.
All right, so we've been getting a lot of questions about, I guess these are more shallow leagues, but let's say your worst player is someone like Royce Freeman. Would you drop him to pick up Ronald Jones, who we both like?
No, I would not do that.
Oh, me either. Okay, last one. This is a trade offer. Should I trade Aaron Jones for Austin Eckler?
No, I would not do that.
I wouldn't do it either.
Yeah.
No. I understand Aaron Jones was bad, but like, what were you expecting in week 1 against Chicago?
It wasn't going to be a good game against Chicago, but knowing that there was a 65-35 like split in terms of snaps is a good thing. And knowing that Jamal Williams showed who he was again, 5 carries, 0 yards, it's a good thing. I'm going to stick with Aaron Jones for right now. It was a tough matchup. He looked fine in the game. It's just a matter of like the matchup it just didn't allow him for very much. And I hope that Packers offense looks much better, because if not, it's not going to be nearly as high scoring as I thought it would be.
All right, guys, that's all the time for today's show. Tex has to go write the primer. I've got some writing to do as well. We really appreciate all you guys tuning in, asking questions. If you've got more, hit us up on Twitter at BobbyFantasyPro, at Mike Taglier NFL. Tex and I both get to as many questions as we possibly can. The shorter, more simple you keep them, more likely they are to be answered. And please don't be a jerk either. I'm just going to mute you if you guys do that. If you enjoyed the show, please hit the like button. And don't forget, I've got my live stream start set coming up Thursday at the same time. So make sure to hit that subscribe button, and tags coming on Sunday mornings every time at, 12 o'clock Eastern?
12 o'clock Eastern is when the show starts, and it goes for an hour. So it's right now. Sorry, awesome. It's 11 to 12. 11 to 12. It goes from 11 to 12. So basically, there's injury news breaking as we're on the show, and I can give you guys instant feedback as to those things as it's happening.
Okay, thanks again, everyone, for watching, and enjoy your football.